Suit up, strap in, warm the tires, and leave on yellow. Time for the MitsuTimes podcast, presented by MitsuTimes.org, the home of the fastest Mitsubishi cars. With your host, Josh.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Josh with MitsuTimes. Today, my guest is Paul. He is the owner and driver of a very special Evo, does a little bit of everything. How are you today, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Josh. And I'm really excited to be on the podcast. And, I listened to a few episodes, or more than a few, and it's just, I hear commonly people talk about needing to do their own research, and I just kind of want to shout out your podcast for, this is a good source for people in the Mitsubishi community to do some research and to learn, how they can enjoy their cars. So Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. One of my, that was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is because a lot of people think that there's only, one way to a nines or, what parts they should buy and what parts they should avoid. And I think that we've had so many special people come onto this podcast as a guest and that we've made it a little bit easier for the community.
For sure, yeah.
Well, Paul, I want to talk about your Evo because it is extraordinarily special because it doesn't just focus on one particular thing. Do some drag racing, do some spectator drags, even do something called ice racing.
Yeah, that's right. And just to start off a little bit, I'll mostly talk about my black Evo, but I do have two different Evos. They're both 2003 Evo 8s. My black one, again, is the one I'll focus on the most. That's the nicer one. And then I have a silver one that's kind of just a rust bucket, but that's the one that I, don't feel so bad about doing ice racing with,
Oh, okay, I got you. Well, let's talk about the setup on that black Evo.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny how you talk about how special it is. And in some ways, it's funny that to me, it's not like modified, like a lot of your other guests, it seemed like, running super fast quarter mile times, obviously quite a few mods. My black Evo is literally on the stock long block, like other than running some GSC S1 cams and some GSC lifters, running some 1200cc high Z injectors. I just recently switched from a 255 pump out to a dual 340 pump setup with a Radium engineering hanger. And I'm running an Evo 9 turbo, which is pushing about 26 PSI, Spearco front mount intercooler, full 3-inch busher exhaust with the hood exit O2, which I really like. Initially, I thought that was going to be way too loud, but it's been great. It's quite the conversation piece, too, at car shows and stuff. And Grimsby boost controller, just a few other items here.
Nice.
Of course, a wideband and boost gauge, 85 gauge. I definitely recommend everyone, of course, have a wideband. It's like one of the best things you can have in your car. For suspension, I'm running Reinhardt R1 coilovers, and I got the White Line roll center bump steer kit with that, and some Hawk HP plus brake pads. And then just a little bit about the rest of the drivetrain. I was lucky enough to get in RS trim OEM front LSD transfer case.
Oh,
so
nice.
I got that transfer case in the car. Again, just a factory OEM, but an RS. And then the transmission was rebuilt by Andy at ASM, and it's got an RS Motors straight cut fourth gear. So with all that said, this car has ran an 11.9 on street tires, pretty horrible 60-foot time, and it dynoed around 425 horsepower. But with that in mind, too, I just want to say, peak horsepower is kind of just a number. I like having that really good power band. So I think some people might think 400 horsepower doesn't seem like a lot, but I think it's all kind of what you do with it and what you want to do with the car.
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard, countless times on here, somebody who took their Evo that they loved so much and turned it into a race car and then wished that they could still, street it sometimes. So, a lot of people say that the Evo is the happiest around 400 horsepower. So I think that's
exactly.
That's a perfect setup.
For sure. And I'm trying to hold myself back. I've had this setup running great, honestly, for 3 years. And we're going to talk probably a little bit more about what I plan to do with in the future. So I'm hoping I don't push it too far, but I get why people do it, right? That's still an addictive thing to just be going faster and adding more horsepower.
For sure, yeah. Well, tell us about the kind of racing that you do with this black one.
Sure. And I'll I'll preface this by saying, like, I'm not a super serious competitive driver. I just really like to get out and have fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's part of what, I can convey here too, is that other people should be able to do the same thing, right? I mean, you just want to get out, have fun with your car. If you're super competitive, I get that. Some people are just driven that way, but I hope that, podcasts like this and other places can just really spread the word that, hey, you can get out there and have fun with your car no matter what you do. And so I do ice racing, as you said. I do that in the winter when it allows, whenever there's enough ice out on the local lakes that we can drive on. Ice racing for us is to explain it as a bit more of like an ice autocross, right? So it's kind of like an autocross setup on the ice. What's different about it, of course, is you have like snowbanks potentially. And then the grip level actually kind of changes because some people run studded tires that actually kind of rip up the ice. And then that can usually kind of, if you run right after a studded tire car, you actually kind of have a bit more grip. And it's just very interesting to have the grip line kind of change. And then again, spectator drags, or spectator eliminator racing, as they call it around here. I've done that on both a half mile clay or dirt track, and then I've done it on a 3rd mile paved, pretty highly banked track, and then, sorry, a 1/4 mile paved. And then there is a 3rd mile one that I was going to do last night, but it got rained out actually. So I've just been trying to find some local tracks that do spectator drags, and there's more than I thought, honestly, if you're willing to drive, a few hours, at least from where I live in Wisconsin.
I feel like spectator drags is kind of becoming the like no prep was a couple years ago. It's starting to become really, really popular.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of just run what you brung, and of course, like, Cletus McFarland and, that set up at the Freedom Factory, I think really got it a lot more popular with, YouTube and online. And it's fun to watch, right? You just see these random cars, you see a Corvette versus an Evo, you see a Tesla, versus a Trailblazer. Like that's just very interesting,
Yep, for sure.
And then finally, just finishing out, drag racing. I do, on occasion for fun, whenever I can get there. And autocross, I try to support my local autocross whenever I can. And then I've had some lapping day and high performance driving experience. I'd like to get more into that a little bit, but honestly, the Evo is probably too much for me right now at my driving level for that. So I need to, if I want to get more into the lapping days and high performance big track stuff, I think I need to really learn a bit more on a lower horsepower car. But that's where I'm at with what I've been racing.
Gotcha. Okay. So what, this ice racing thing, I just think that's so interesting. I guess I was kind of in my mind, I was picturing like someone came out and did like a Zamboni into an autocross or into a circuit race thing. But I think the autocross part of it is even cooler because, a lot of autocross people love the slow speed turns, and on the ice it's got to be even more difficult. What is it that got you into that style of racing, made you want to participate in that?
Yeah, for sure. And to be fair, they do have what you initially thought. There is other people, and I think that's been going on even longer. Circle track racing has been around kind of forever, and they have done the circle track type wheel to wheel ice racing. They do that too.
Wow.
That's just not really, what most people that own an Evo, of course, or, a nice car don't really always want to go wheel to wheel. So yeah, the autocross type ice racing is really a plow truck goes out there, plows a course. That's the fun part too. You can just create whatever you want for a course out there. And yeah, that's a lot of fun. But how I got into it is actually, it's a funny kind of interesting story because back in the mid 2000s when I was in college, I went to a college in central Wisconsin. And, like you go to college thinking like you're going to make some friends, at school, and they're going to, potentially be lifelong friends. Funny part for that for me was I met my college lifelong friends like in a parking lot because they were car people.
Oh,
like
nice.
I just found the local car crew that hung out at, in a parking lot. And like some of those people I met there are still better friends that I made through actual college classes and stuff, which is funny.
That's awesome.
And they didn't go to college with me. They just like lived in the area. But how it leads to the ice racing story is that, during the winter, like these same people would just kind of get together and they'd be like, well, let's just go out and just have some fun on the back roads. If there's a snowstorm coming, like we had our snow tires on, we're like, let's get out there and have some fun. And there was this lake probably, I don't know, 10, 15 miles north of where we lived, and we just drive out to the lake. And as I mentioned earlier, the circle track people had a course usually out there that was plowed. So we just go out there and just play with the grip on a circle track, like, and just go out there and do that. And then eventually they just actually, got enough people together through a sports car club to just do these events on the weekends where they're like, let's, get a course plowed. We'll have some trucks out there to pull you out if there are snowbanks that you get stuck in. And then, you go out there and basically just like your weekly autocross, but this time it's on ice.
That's so cool.
And like, what was cool about these people I met too is like, for me at least, it seemed different. Whereas I used to kind of feel like I was around all these car people, and these were quote unquote car guys and car girls, but they were actually still more of the driving type. Like they really just wanted to drive, and like that was so cool and like refreshing to me to kind of meet these people that really wanted to get out and do the driving. And with the ice racing, it's nice too because it's actually relatively low risk, right? Sometimes there actually aren't even any snowbanks. So if you just go in too hot and you fly off a corner, it's just like no big deal. You just kind of went off into, a different part of the ice.
Yeah.
And like it's a low consumable event too. Like you're not really wearing your tires very much. Some people even do it without snow tires, which I wouldn't fully recommend. But if you just want to get out there with what you got, sure, still do it. And then there's also, like I said, the studded tires. That's where you're gonna kind of be spending some more money and more consumables. But realistically, like it's a great place to learn car control. Like I feel like it makes me just a better overall driver in the winter, when you run into certain situations where you got crappy weather. So it's just a lot of fun. And then finally, it was nice that eventually like larger organizations like Grid Life even kind of tagged along, and they started sponsoring like a Grid Life ice battle, they called it. So like they got people coming out there. They had I got some really cool shots from that of my Evo. Like they had this guy flying a drone, and I got these cool like shots of me driving around, and it looks like I'm really cool and doing really good. But when you're out there, it's funny because you're actually going kind of slow unless you're in a studded tire car. But it's a boatload of fun.
Good deal. I like that a lot. That's really interesting.
Yeah, if you ever have the chance, anyone has a chance, you should definitely do it. I know, again, in Wisconsin and I know Minnesota, they do it on some of the, smaller lakes. Can't say where else they all go in the country, but I know people will drive up like probably 4 or 5 hours from Chicago just to come to like central Wisconsin to do it. Like they trail their cars up, spend the night because it's fun.
Wow, that's cool. So how did you go from this to the spectator drags or the spectator eliminators?
So there's another kind of fun story. I grew up going to the circle track, a dirt track. Like I said, a half-mile dirt track. I went there every Saturday. Whole family event. My family would go. My dad actually built, 350 small block Chevys, still does for like a lot of the race car guys that go out there. So I grew up around that. And every now and then they'd have the spectator drags. And it was, V8 community. A lot of the V8 wheel drive cars would go out there, and they actually had 2 different classes, and they kind of kept this, what I consider a little bit antiquated thinking for a while, where it's like, the 4 and 6 cylinders were in the slow class, if you will, and the V8s were in the fast class. So they had 2 different classes. But back in high school, I was like, I had this first generation DSM. It was only front wheel drive, but it was turbo, and I was like, man, this car's quick. Like I was like, this is a quick car. Like I think it would do good doing spectator drag. So I'm basically this high school kid. I go out there, I'm nervous as heck, and I honestly like sucked at it. I was terrible. Like, because I never really tried to drive fast in a corner before. Again, this is when you're that young, it's just you go fast in a straight line. That's kind of it. And, you don't want to be too stupid out on the street to really push your limits, going around corners either.
True.
So that was a little bit embarrassing. But fast forward literally like 10, 15 years after that, like, I was like, I should get back. Part of me was like, I should get back there, and like, no one else really cares or knows that I did poorly, right? But it's just like in my mind, I'm like, man, it'd be nice to have some redemption a little bit here. And I had picked up this Evo, the black Evo that we're talking about, and it was a roller. It needed a lot of work. It needed paint. So I was like, you know what, this is perfect. I'll just get this car set up. I'll I think a decent horsepower Evo should do great out there with a good driver. So at the time, there's this like rear wheel drive, of course, Camaro. I think it was like a 70s, 71. That was doing really good, like really winning pretty much every week. It was a really good driver. It was really well set up. And I was talking to people about, like, I think an Evo could do really good out there. And it's funny now looking back, but most people in my community didn't know what an Evo was, if I'm being honest. They just kind of thought that car, no, the four cylinder is not going to win. It's like just so funny to think about now because not it's basically dominated out there for quite a while, and people are honestly kind of almost mad about it. But it's like, the comments now are like, well, of course it won. It's all-wheel drive and it's a rally car. It's a purebred rally car, and it's like, yeah, I guess, but you still need to bring it out there. You still need to put in the effort and be willing to put your car out there and do that. Itself. So, yep. And initially, just finishing up the story about it a little bit. Initially, my friend, again, Andy at ASM, helped me build the car too. And I was like, he's a good driver. I'm like, I want him out there. So at first I had him out there driving the car. And of course he did really well, just kind of killed it. And eventually I was like, well, I can take this over. I can do it myself. So, and by this time I had some experience again with ice racing, with autocross. So I had now finally got this experience of trying to drive a car fast through corners. So I did better, and I would say especially the ice racing was, I think, very helpful out on the dirt track because you'd be surprised how kind of it can feel similar in certain ways. So I took it out there for, like, they have their big finale kind of during the fair when most of the cars show up, and I went out there. I had a really fun race against that Camaro I'm talking about because it was definitely a good driver versus bad driver situation. It was, to be fair, my first time driving that Black Evo out there. And I did at least launch it good enough to beat him off the line and then power through. But then coming into turn 3, it's kind of my move. I'm like, man, I just don't want to put this car into the wall. So I'm going to brake really early, really hard and make sure I just don't slide right into the wall, at the fastest point of the track. And what that did is it gave this Camaro a chance to really kind of catch up to me. And he starts getting right side by side with me, and then it's just a drag race to the finish, and it was just a cool, fun moment. I beat him to the finish too, luckily, but it was just a fun race. And ever since then, it's been a lot of fun. Some people are, saying I'm bringing a gun to a knife fight in some ways, but you know what, man? The rules let you bring guns. Like, why don't more people bring them in this case? You know what I mean? Like, all-wheel drive cars are allowed. Like, it's not. If you don't like it, I get it. If you just wanted to see a good old-fashioned V8 versus V8 rear-wheel drive class, but comes back to the general spectator stuff that's going on now. It's run what you brung, and that's it.
And yeah, that's the way the world's headed, right?
I mean, maybe I don't know. Some people, everyone likes to complain, right? But
as a whole, it seems like the automotive industry is headed towards more smaller and smaller engines. So I think that's just,
that way for sure. Yeah, that way 100%. Yeah, I mean, electric cars. I can't wait to see an electric car like out on this dirt track. If I think people would be really mad then. If they're mad that it was a 4-cylinder, wait till it's electric.
Yeah, wait till it has no engine at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Paul, by now it seems pretty obvious, but what is it that got you into the Evo platform in the first place?
Back in college days again, so like 06, 07, after the Evos were a couple years old, the Evo 8 was a couple years old, I was at local autocrosses, and like I just kind of fell in love with other cars that people own that were there, and they just sounded so cool. They looked cool to me. They were a practical car. Like, again, I had a 1G DSM that, those things barely have a back seat.
Right.
Like, and then you switch to an Evo and it's like, this is practical, and it was more reliable. You could definitely put more horsepower down at the time, I thought, and have it more reliable than a DSM. So I was like, this is great. And they're doing good. Like, they're winning events. So that's kind of what it was that really got me into the Evo platform.
All right, Paul. So this Black Evo, what was it like when you first picked it up?
So when I first bought it, as I think I mentioned, it was just a rolling shell. So I ended up picking up the Black Evo shell and an engine from B&M Performance in Minnesota. They do a lot of Evo parts and stuff. So I got a shell from Chris and an engine. And so then I was like, well, I need to piece this thing together. I need to find all these parts. Why don't I kind of just document this? So that's what I did. It got me really back into trying to do more YouTube more frequently because I had felt like I had a way to make some content. So that's the way I got it. Like it actually had like a blue door. Like I said, I needed paint. Wow. It's a black Evo, but it had one blue door. Like that's the way I got it. That's why I got it cheaper, because it's like, well, it needs a paint job for sure. But it was a clean Texas car, clean title Texas car. So I was like, heck yeah, like no rust. That's what I want. And I just kind of wanted a project at the time that I could take my time and build up. So I spent a couple, pretty much solid 2 years getting it going whenever I had my free time.
That's really cool too, because I don't think anyone's ever documented building an Evo. I mean, you basically built it from the ground up.
Yeah, in some ways, I pieced it back together. I'm hesitant to say I built it, but yeah, but I did really just wanted to document every little thing that you'd have to do if you were trying to do a similar process, or just document all those little things that people might run into and be like, well, what do I do in this situation?
Almost like a frame off restoration kind of deal.
Someday, maybe, right? With these cars, you never know.
So, Paul, what is it about this car that keeps you motivated to keep pushing it, to keep going to these events and potentially breaking it, just in the name of fun?
I'm glad you say it that way too, because honestly, that's what I had to get over, right? Was like breaking it. Like, I understand a fear of breaking your car, but at least now I'm at the point in my life where, it's not my main car. I have a regular daily driver, but I do feel like I can drive my Evo. I do drive it to pick up my daughter from school, and just do random, regular street driving and stuff. But like the Evo just is such a connected car, and I feel like it's one of the last. It was that last dash, I think, of cars that are just like a raw power, raw mechanical car, where it didn't have. I mean, mine doesn't have ACD. It doesn't have an active center differential. Like it's not computer controlled, if you will.
Yeah.
Like that's what I think I really like about it. Nothing wrong with like, buying a Tesla and then, running in tens. Like you could definitely buy a faster straight line car than my Evo is right now, 100%. But if you don't enjoy it that much, or if it's, like it doesn't stand out, like I still like having a car that, when I go to a car show or a car meet, people like kind of crowd around a little bit and like, oh man, I haven't seen an Evo in like a long time, or, so it's kind of that. And just, I love the look of it. I know it's not for everyone, but I love the look of an Evo 8 and 9. 10s are nice too. And it's just so fun. That's what kind of motivates me to keep going with it.
It's nice too to have, like you said, carrying on a legacy of a car that's, been around for 30 plus years, and maybe the younger generation doesn't know what it is, but then they see your car and like, oh man, this actually is a cool car.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just broadening people's idea of even the car market, right? Because I think some people are stuck just thinking U.S. market, and it's like, yeah, no, this car's been around for a long time in other markets. And like, even as I like dived into a lot of stuff to learn about the Evo, I was like, man, there's these taillights that are the European version that have this weird fog light thing. Like, there's just some cool kind of stuff out there in different countries.
For sure. I like that. In Europe they have like those different power level trims. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's funny how they name those, right? The FQ whatever, right? I think those ones. It's like what FQ stands for. Yeah. 360. Yeah.
I think that's super cool. Well, Paul, let's say a time machine gets invented tomorrow and you can go back in time. Are you still picking up this shell and taking it home and going through the whole process again?
The short answer is yes, but the long answer is that's not the way to do it in some ways. If you do watch my series on this that I did, like there's so many little parts you need to find. This car, and any car guy can probably relate, but this car nickel and dimed me. Like trying to find all these little parts along the way was so tough when you buy a shell.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine.
And I get that you want to, again, say built not bought kind of deal. If you're that kind of person, you really want to build it cool. But there's a different way to build it, right? I could have just bought like a stock car and then modified it and then had the same end result and still probably had a good feeling of satisfaction that I built it the way I wanted it without having to go through the effort of finding every little part. And OEM parts are so expensive. So, if I could do it over again, I would probably, or if I was giving advice to someone on it, I'd be like, maybe don't buy a shell unless you already have like a donor car, or if, you just have a bunch of random Evo parts anyway. or just go into it knowing that, hey, this is probably going to take longer than I think, and there's going to be more money I need to spend on finding random parts than I think.
For sure. Did you have the Black Evo and the Silver Evo at the same time while you were building this Black Evo?
No, so the timeline works that I had the Black Evo in like 2017-18 is when I started building that one, and I had it done. Yeah, I had it done around 18, I guess, and then I had only that car until 2020 or 2021. And then in 2021, I picked up this rusty Evo, which again, trying to, as it kind of relates to the question, I was like, well, I don't want to buy a shell again. I buy this full car. So I bought this full car, but not really knowing the extent of the rust. It wasn't running, but everything was there. So I'm like, sweet, as we just discussed, I'm like, well, I don't have to buy all these little things now. Well, that one was so rusty that it almost didn't help a whole lot. But so to answer your question, I got the silver one around 2001, got it running in around 2022. So basically the last 3 years I've had them both.
I think the tough part would be, trying to piece this car back together. You don't even know what goes where if you don't have another Evo to compare it to.
Exactly. Yeah. When I first got it, it was a lot of questions to other Evo people, just trying to sort it out and finding information online. Right. So like even back then it was still more the Evolution M forums, and I'd go to forums and try to find advice there. And now there's more people on YouTube that help out with that kind of stuff too. So yeah, there was definitely a bit the owner's manual. Like everyone should know that you can get basically a free copy, PDF copy of the owner's manual for the Evos online, and just that's a good source to look at a lot of stuff too.
This episode of the MitsuTimes podcast is brought to you by Hockman Fabrication and Speed. They offer custom fabrication, welding, and exhaust services. Their specialized team of professionals has over 40 years of combined experience in the automotive industry, dedicated to providing their customers with top-notch quality service they can depend on. Their customers always rave about their excellent service and attention to detail. That's why they have received top customer reviews time and time again, offering top-tier certified chassis and roll cage work and fabrication on any make and model. From classic cars to off-road vehicles to hypercars, they have experience and know-how to get the job done right. Contact them today to learn more about their services or to get started on your next project. Facebook and Instagram at Hockman Fabrication and Speed or HockmanFabricationspeed.com. Yeah. So, Paul, you talked a little bit about your how-to videos. I want to talk about I want to go into detail about like what got you started in this and what motivates you to make these videos and kind of what they're about.
I feel like I've learned that I'm a fairly detailed person in some ways. Like I want to know the little details to things, and it might drive other people crazy because I will ask people a lot of questions that I don't always expect them to have the answers to, but I'm just like, do you know this? Because I would love to know for sure that I'm doing this right. Mm-hmm. And I assume you may have had this experience too, but have you ever like gone on YouTube or anywhere and searched like how to do something?
Oh, for sure.
And they pretty much skip the exact step you're trying to figure out. Yep. You knew everything else, but that one step they skip because it's controversial or they don't know exactly how to say it.
Or they say, oh, that part's really easy, so I skipped over it. Well, I
exactly. Yeah, they'll give you something about it where it's just like, man, like. So I decided like I basically started just documenting. Like I'm gonna document what I do here. So I had an 05 Evo for a while that had a ACD T-case, and it started to whine, and I'm like, it was like 2011. I'm like, I'm just going to pull this out. Again, luckily my dad's a mechanic, so I had access to a hoist. I don't actually have a hoist myself, but I went to my dad's house and ripped it out, and I just filmed myself doing it. And then I gave a little voiceover to it after, and it's just so I kind of, that's the way I work. Like I need to actually like work on it myself. Mm-hmm. I can't really do voiceover I can't explain it while I'm doing it. Especially when there's cases when I run into like, well, I don't know how to do this yet. Like, and I don't want to like waste people's time with them watching me figure out how to do it. I want to show them how I did it after I figured it out. Right.
That makes sense.
So I did that. They were pretty well received, and some, after a long enough timeline, people, comments, people are just saying, oh, thanks so much. It helped me out a lot. And it's like, honestly, like that's gratifying. It's nice to know that I help people out. So I did the same thing with turbo install video on that same Evo, and then eventually as I mentioned, once I got that Evo 8 roller, I was like, man, I just might as well just start filming everything. And along the way of the kind of documenting the build, I started doing how-tos on certain things. So like timing belt video, it's been super popular, as you can imagine. I really tried to detail pretty much everything to the best I could in that timing belt video. I did a clutch install video, and now I'm currently still working on like the dual pump fuel hanger install video, because that one's pretty involved as well. And I've just been learning a lot along the way. And I like to say that I'm honestly just kind of a guy that's documenting what he does and learns along the way. So I'm just trying not to be afraid of making mistakes, but I'm trying to do the best research I can to make sure I don't make super obvious mistakes. But I also like to leave it open, right? Because I think the world's gotten better, but there used to be so much like hate in the comments about everything, and like anyone that could find a reason to tell you did something wrong, they want to jump in and do it, right? So I've kind of tried to work that in to be like, hey man, like at the end of my videos, I'm usually like, if you guys think I did something wrong, there's a better way to do it, just leave me a comment, let me know. Like other people can learn from my video too if I did something wrong, So and more recently, honestly, I've gotten into how-to videos for non-car people, if you will, because they're honestly the ones that are most appreciative. During COVID, I was like, didn't have a whole lot to do. I think it was right around COVID time. And then like I have a Honda Accord that's bone stock, and I'm like, well, I should change the filters on this thing. I'm like, well, I'm usually doing how-to videos for Evos. Why don't I do it for my Honda Accord? Well, guess what? Honda Accords are way more popular than Evos. So the views that video got just on changing the engine air filter and cabin air filter, I was like, holy man, like, and people were just like, thank you so much for telling me how to unlatch the safety latch on the hood. And I'm like, you know what? That makes sense. Like everyone has a different starting point, So it's just like, I'm going to be super detailed. So lately I've just been super detailing, like friends and family that'll let me do filters on their cars. I've been doing those and just posting them up, and usually they don't get a lot of views initially, but eventually they kind of have a longer tail where, people start searching for them. And then I just, it's nice to help people out and make those videos along the way. Cause again, Evos just aren't super popular, even though I've definitely done a whole bunch of Evo videos, how-to stuff, but it's fun to be able to help other kind of non-car people as well.
See, now looking for the hood release latch is something that I would never even think of to go over. So that's really cool that, people are appreciative and looking for stuff like that.
What I've even found with some of these ones where I didn't know. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but like there was a Ford Fusion that I think it was that it's just not, the hood release latch isn't in the middle. It's like over to the left side of the hood. It's a weird setup. And even the Supras now, the newer Supras, you got to pull the thing twice. It's got a little ×2 like on the lever, but you got to pull it twice to release. Wow. Like there's just little things that that's what I wanted to document for people. Like, cause even if you are a car person, you might be like, well, why the heck, those little things can trip you up. Those are the things I want to cover that hopefully people can find.
You think every car is the same until stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, if someone out there is listening, they want to just get some more power out of their Evo without going full on race car or possibly even, jeopardizing their reliability, which I know, is a big issue for a lot of people. What advice would you give them for their build so, they can go in the right direction without spending a bunch of money?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I want to speak to what I've done. Of course, that means there are other answers out there, but we talked about it earlier. That 400 horsepower mark can be so much fun and so reliable, and that's the way basically both my Evos are set up. And to do that realistically, you pretty much, if you can run E85 in your area, I suggest you switch to E85. Of course, you have to get a tune. I know you've had multiple guests talk about finding the right place to get your car tuned. So you'll of course want to find a good tuner that can help you for what you want. But then you got upgrade your injectors to match that fuel. So usually I'd say 1,000 to 1,200 cc injectors are pretty good if you're looking for that 400 horsepower mark. You got to drop in that 255 fuel pump. You got to do some exhaust, and don't forget your O2 housing, because if you can't just run full 3-inch with your stock O2 housing, that's probably going to be a bit of a bottleneck at that stock O2 housing. And then, of course, a wideband and boost gauge, because you just got to keep track of this. That's how you keep from breaking stuff. Like, you pay attention to what's going on. So a wideband is super valuable just to watch your air to fuel ratio. And of course, you need a boost controller. So I think that's the short list. And if you can afford it, I would say just a larger intercooler and some piping, because people like to do that anyway, just because, it's fun having that bigger front mount. And then cams, if you want to do cams, again, I'm running the GSC S1s, and like, you don't need to upgrade, your valve springs for that one. So like, there are a couple options out there where, it's borderline where whether or not you should just upgrade your valve springs or not. But I've had great luck with the GSCs, and if you can afford it and want to do it, that should put you close to that 400 horsepower mark. But again, horsepower is just a number. I think if you go somewhere that has a nice solid tune on it and you're only at 375, I think you're still going to love it.
We talk on this podcast a lot about the buy once, cry once, but I feel like that, that's obviously true, but it really depends on the goals of your car, right? Like, you shouldn't switch straight away. If you plan to stick to the 16G, there's no reason to go to S3 cams and 2150 cc's. I mean, you're just going to cause yourself more trouble.
100%. Yeah. And I agree in general. Like, yeah, they don't buy super cheap stuff or whatever, but like, also don't mod the crap out of your car all at once. Like, it's super hard to troubleshoot when you threw on 5 new parts at a time, right?
Absolutely.
So I mean, if you can take the time to just install, some of them have to go together, right? In some ways, like, you can't always just drop in larger injectors without obviously getting it retuned. But like, you can pretty much put in a fuel pump, and have that ready to go. Make sure the fuel pump setup works fine. You can swap out your exhaust, make sure there's no issues with that, with fitment or anything like that. You can install your gauges. Like, you can do all these things, and then slowly, like, if you don't want to run E85 right away, don't switch to E85 right away until you can, just to make sure you're not running into other capacity issues with your injectors and stuff like that. So I mean, but again, to your point, like, if it's just part of that is just don't buy something super cheap, and maybe just know your overall goals, right? So if you are like, well, I'm not going to street this car a lot, I guess, sure. And if you're going to have a shop fully build it, yeah, then buy the right part the first time and consult with that shop about like what you think is going to work best for what you want with the car.
I know it sounds counterproductive from what we usually say on this podcast, where the buy once, cry once, but you don't always need the biggest and baddest.
Yep, for sure.
So, Paul, let's say that, I'm a member of the Wisconsin DSM Club, and I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm thinking, ice racing, that sounds pretty cool. I want to go out there and give that a try. What advice would you have for someone who's looking to go out there and get started in that, for their first time?
Yeah, for sure. In general, for like finding the events and stuff, I would say, utilize Facebook, or, we can use social media and stuff for good, right? If you are in the Wisconsin area, I'd look up the Fox Valley Sports Car Club, which is also known as FVSCC, or the Central Wisconsin Sports Car Club, which is CWSCC. Those are ones that are local to me, but otherwise, yeah, you just kind of want to try to find other car clubs. Probably just if wherever you live, I try to find a Facebook group for that car club in your area, or a Discord channel, or whatever, the technology, they're using to find the events. And then, of course, just try to talk to someone, get a feel for what the events are like. See if you can find videos online of those events, so you can see kind of how they're ran and what they're doing, and see if they look right for you. And then when it comes to your actual car, again, there's not a lot to do. Just if you have a basic maintained car, you don't need to bring an Evo out there if you're worried about getting rusty. Like, you can bring your Honda Accord out there with snow tires. I would recommend snow tires. But even if you don't, just try. If you don't want to invest in snow tires first for whatever reason, take your car out there, talk to someone that's done it. Let them know you've never been there before. Ask them questions about what to expect. Try to get, just like if you were attending autocross for the first time or something like that, get a feel for the event. Usually they allow ride-alongs. So if you want to get just know where the course is, find someone to ride along with. If you get a chance to ride along with someone with a studded terra car, definitely do that, because that's a heck of an experience. Ride along with a studded terra car. It's crazy. But in general, if you want to learn, car control and go out and have some fun, see how the grip changes. Again, it's a relatively low cost event, in my opinion, to attend.
That's really cool because I feel like racing is one of those things where people are like, I don't want to spend my $250 tech card to get into this certain race, and stuff like this would be perfect because your chances of crashing are somewhat low. Your cost to get in is somewhat low, so it's a great for a beginner who's just looking to have some fun in their car.
Yeah, for sure. And like I had mentioned a little bit, like when they plow the course, like sometimes you get courses that have snowbanks and sometimes you don't. And honestly, if there aren't snowbanks or if it's a soft snow, you don't even have to like hardly worry about messing up your bumper or anything like that.
That's awesome. Well, Paul, let's talk about your goals for 2024. I mean, the racing season's probably, just getting started where you are. Is a lot to do this year. What are your goals?
Yeah, for sure. My goals with the Silver Evo, my rusty one, is basically just to drive it and enjoy it. I have a couple spectator races hopeful that I want to do. I think I mentioned I was going to do one last night, but it got rained out. It's a 3rd-mile paved place called Norway Speedway. I've never been there before, but I wanted to give that a shot. So I want to take it spectator racing, also on dirt if I can. If my schedule allows, Shawano Speedway is the dirt half-mile track. I'm going to try to make it to that one. But then also, luckily enough, again, my family's been super supportive, even though I grew up like a muscle car guy, but like my dad actually is kind of helping sponsor this Silver Evo a little bit. And with that, we did recently pick up a new roller that's rust free.
Oh, nice.
So my goal will kind of be to get everything swapped over from the silver one to this new roller and have it a little safer of a car without so much rust on the rear chassis legs.
Well,
And then the black car goals, honestly, I should be working on it right now. Actually, I want to get low 11s, maybe stock 10s, switching just to sticky tires and then adding some nitrous. So I got the sticky tires, and the nitrous is something I've been working on over this past week, basically just trying to figure out how I'm gonna make all that work. And again, I just recently got that dual pump setup installed so that I can support the nitrous with the fuel since it's a wet kit. So then maybe I can move up to the top 10 on your list in the 16G turbo list.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
16G list is so cool, but it's one of those things where I've said multiple times on here. People are probably tired of hearing me say it. It used to be people would maybe go to a 16G or try to max out their 16G, push it to 30 psi. But now it's like people go straight to a 6266. They don't get to enjoy how fun the 16G is.
Exactly. It's got so much potential. It's such a good power band. Like it's just fun. Yeah. So fun.
So, Paul, what are your long-term goals with these cars?
I mean, that's pretty simple, I guess. I just want to keep driving it and having fun, and I want to spend more time in the car in a drivable condition than not. I mean, there's always that joke about your cars just sitting on jack stands. Like, when's it going to be done? And I get that a good build can take time doing it by yourself, like for sure. Like if you have certain goals, but I want to just kind of try to enjoy, having these cars drivable and just spend time behind the wheel.
I like that plan. I think a lot of us need to have those same long-term goals.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you talked about it briefly, but what events do you plan to attend this year that we could come out and see either of these cars in action?
Yeah, sure. If anyone's close by, and it's actually in the UP in Upper Michigan, is the Norway Speedway. They do spectator races every now and then. So I'm going to head up there, and they actually do like a spectator champion at the end of the year. I'm not 100% sure how that works out, but I don't know if an Evo has actually ever won it. So maybe it could be the first Evo to do that. So Norway Speedway in Upper Michigan. Spectator drags at Shawano Speedway is coming up, actually, I think next weekend, if it doesn't get rained out. So spectator drags on dirt, if you ever want to watch that. That's super fun to watch. My local drag strip is Wisconsin International Raceway. That's usually where I'd go on Friday nights, usually just to test and tune, and that's where I'll be trying to get my time slip. And then there's local car shows around the area. I'm near Green Bay. Green Bay has some good spots. There's a group, I think, called Green Bay Car Scene in Wisconsin Car Enthusiast Club, something like that. All the, like I said, search through your local cars shows, but those are the ones around here. So I'll be at some of those events too, because I like to just go and look at other people's cars too sometimes.
Yeah.
And then ice racing will be when weather allows. Honestly, last season there was nothing. We did not get enough ice to have safe conditions to ice race at all last year. So I'm definitely hopeful that this year can probably be the last year for my rusty Evo to go out there and do some fun. But that's, again, if you want to pay attention to that, I'd check out the Central Wisconsin Sports Car Club page for information on that one. And then just a side note, again, just because I honestly want to talk about all forms of racing, and just getting out there. I'm going to be attending, hopefully, in person, my first Formula Drift event, not as a competitor, of course, because Formula Drift, you really got to work your way up there. But I'm going to go to Washington to watch Robert Thorne and the ASM crew and cheer them on at a Formula Drift event. So
cool.
Anything automotive that you can go to, I definitely just encourage you to get out there and experience it.
Yeah, for sure. Even if not necessarily your cup of tea. I know a lot of people hate on drift. I think you just go out there, watch the action, smell the ethanol fumes. You'll be all right.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that too, because I feel like I used to, definitely back in the day, be like, oh yeah, there was this stigma against drifting being stupid, but man, it takes, I can tell you from the driver's perspective, I'm not that guy, I'm not that driver, but I talk to enough drivers to know that is a skill. There's a lot of skill involved in that. Yeah. It does kind of suck that it's judged, it comes down to judging in some ways. That's kind of annoying, but there's so much skill involved with those drivers that I think if you're a driver, I think you still got to respect what they're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Paul, where can people find and follow you on social media, as well as watch your how-to videos?
Yeah, sure. I'm under Boosted Films pretty much everywhere. So YouTube is my main go-to. I am on TikTok, where I kind of just throw up whatever I want anytime on TikTok. I'm on Instagram as well. For whatever reason, though, Boosted Films was taken. So you got to drop the S if you want to find me on Instagram. So don't be afraid to reach out, though. On Instagram, again, it's Boosted Films without the S, Boosted Film. But I've had people reach out to me and connect with me there. If you got questions, let me know. I will say, though, I've pretty much put a lot of my knowledge out into my videos. So if you have a certain question, I might direct you to a video I've already created. And again, I'm not a shop. I'm not an expert. I just kind of like to document what I do. And I just want to say too, it's great that, again, back to this podcast, and I think we should use the technology we have and to learn more and to help us, everyone, from making different mistakes. So podcast, YouTube, social media connections. If you want to branch out to learn, you can learn so much about certain things before diving into it now. And
for sure.
That didn't used to be the case. I think it was your last podcast guest too that was talking about barriers to entry, and there are certainly still barriers to entry to certain things, but I feel like they have gotten better, and it's nice when you can try to reach out to certain people first before you go anywhere to an event, to learn as much as you can. If you're that type of person, some people can just jump head first into it. I get that too. That's just not me. I usually want to be prepared and know what the heck I'm getting into before I go. And it certainly helps to have a friend that's done it before. And now you can try to use social media to find that right friend,
Yeah, definitely. Some people like to learn the hard way, and I think research is definitely the easy way first, right?
Yeah.
Save yourself some money and some heartache, maybe some blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, at the end, I always give people a chance to give a thanks or a shout out to anybody who's helped them out along the way. Is there anybody that you want to give a thanks or a shout out to?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. I want to shout out to anyone that's helped me, in person. Hopefully I know it's a vague answer, but you know who you are if you help me out with my car at all. I appreciate it. Anyone that sent me parts to review. Some people send me some Evo parts and stuff that I can review and try to, again, help people make more informed decisions on what they want to buy and give a review of things. My parents are super supportive. It's cool that I came from a car family, and they kind of, I feel like other people's you have the potential for your parents or people to just kind of not be, super supportive in what you do, especially when it comes to cars, and because they can be a waste of money. But so shout out to my parents for being supportive, even though I switched, from the V8 muscle car stuff over to turbo 4 cylinders. My girlfriend, just, supportive, doesn't, judge what I do. Not her thing, but, just lets me be me. So I got to say, like, hopefully everyone has a partner out there that just lets them be them and don't feel bad about working on their own thing. Andy at ASM, 100,000,000 times over. He's been the guy to really help me out whenever I get stuck with stuff, and he's been my tuner, and he doesn't focus on Evos as much anymore. So I don't know if I'd expect, you to reach out to him for that, but I would definitely look at the ASM, shop, especially if you do want to do any like wheel-to-wheel stuff. He does a lot of S2000 and FRS chassis things now, so he's the place to go for that. Ronnie at RS Motors, he is the still kind of more the Mitsubishi guy. He's based in Minnesota, and he can do dyno, does more of the tunes there. Just a great guy too. Has helped me out with so many questions. Like, it's one of those people I feel bad for. Him and Andy, I feel bad for that I ask him 1,000 questions, but they're kind of the peek behind the curtain for me to try and make sure I give good advice too. Sometimes, when I'm trying to make sure I get things right. And one other racing event, again, all types of racing that being involved with, RS Motors and their team have done, it's been a couple of years now, but they did the One Lap of America trip with their Evo.
Oh, nice.
He finished second twice, which is overall finishing second is a real achievement. They came very close to winning. So, I mean, I made a documentary on it. It's like an hour long. So if you don't want to watch it all, I get it. But I tagged along with them back in 2018 and 17, both those years. And those years actually weren't the years they finished second. I was like a jinx for them. I think they did it 4 years in a row, and the 2 years before I did it, they did really well. And then they broke stuff when I was tagging along. But, so just a shout out to that. And like the One Lap, experience too is very cool. I only did it to film and document people, but if you're interested in road racing stuff, you should definitely look into, the One Lap of America. And a couple of final things, just shout out to all my YouTube subscribers, of course. It's just great that so many people developed connections and reached out to me. They helped me build my black car in some ways. Like I was like, I need to find a fuel sending unit, or I need to find these lines for the OEM oil cooler. And like, people would message me like, I got some, like, and like, they're not trying to take advantage. They're just trying to help me build the car. So that was super cool.
That is super cool.
And finally, just other YouTubers, accounts, like, there's quite a few that I follow. So I would also encourage anyone here to, if they're thinking about building stuff, if they just have any itch to build and document what they do, just do it. Like, document your stuff, make some videos. Who cares if they get 10 views? Like, you might even just be the person to look back on them later and be like, man, that was cool that I like kind of documented how I went through that.
Sure.
I definitely wouldn't have thought, even 5-6 years ago now that I'd be really talking to you about this build I did, so long ago. And honestly, some of those videos are embarrassing to me when I look back, because I'm so bad on camera. Like, I'm not good on camera, and you don't need to go on camera to document what you do either, but that's what I was trying to do. And then, yeah, so like Gears and Gasoline, a little shout out there too. Like, there's some good Evo content on there, high quality stuff from Gears and Gasoline. And they also spread the general message that I want to leave people with too, that like, we're all in the car community. I mean, I love that you guys are devoted to bringing Mitsubishi people together, because I still think there's definitely a need for that kind of silo. But don't forget that we're all in a car community here, like V8s, 4-cylinders, electric. Like, we're all in that family where we should be fighting, basically just to be able to do these events, so we don't, lose, the next generation of drivers. If they are self-driving cars, like, we want to have these events so people can still get out there and enjoy this on that racing level. No matter what you're racing, no matter where you're racing, we're all kind of part of this car community.
That's very true. Well, all right, Paul, I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and tell your story. I hope that we can get some more people interested in ice racing, and some people, go subscribe to his YouTube channel so you can keep track of everything else he's doing.
Yeah, 100%. I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you for listening to the MitsuTimes podcast. Check out our Instagram and Facebook for daily updates. Get added to our list by going to MitsuTimes.org and clicking Submit a Slip. Thank you to all of our sponsors.